All right, welcome everybody to the February edition of the Boston Tug Tableau user group. So we have a couple of quick announcements and then we're going to get right into it because I'm telling you what, we have some really good content today. So we're hoping you guys can stick around. We've got a great presentation and then a debate that you guys get to actually settle who the winner is. So please stick around, all right? Should be a lot of fun today. Okay, so little agenda, quick announcements. Then we'll have our first presenter. We have Tina Covelli, who is going to talk to us about designing for effectiveness. All right, then, as I said, we have a debate. So Tableau plus Figma. So is that a benefit in the workplace? And we've got four great debaters with us: Autumn Battani, Robert Janzik, Jen Dawes, and Dustin Cabral. And then, as always, please stick around if you can afterwards. We have virtual networking. Some real short announcements. So I know everybody's curious about Tableau Conference 2022. We can only tell you what we know, which is not a lot at this point. But we do know that supposedly in the middle to the end of this month, you should start to hear some announcements. So forget the rumors. Earmuffs until you hear something officially from Tableau, but we're all hoping to hear that in the near future. All right, Iron Viz is going on right now, as many of you know. So if you are planning on submitting something, please remember that submission is due by midnight Pacific time this coming up Monday, February the 7th. We've seen a lot of great stuff coming in, and there's always a lot of great stuff at the deadline. So we're all super excited to see what you guys are going to submit if you haven't submitted yet. So if you're still working on it, get to work. And finally, Boston Tug-centric announcement. We're, as always, having a call out for speakers and live hosts. So if you are interested in joining the Tug and being a speaker and presenting on something, please let any of us know. We're very easy to find on Twitter. And we're also, if anybody out there is interested in hosting a live event, we're inching closer and closer to that. So please feel free to reach out also to us in that regard. We'd love to talk to you. Okay. Our first presenter on designing for effectiveness. As I said, we have Tina Cavelli. She is a freelance graphic designer with PitchList, a major data viz enthusiast who is pursuing her master's degree right now in data analytics. She's a frequent participant in community-led projects like IronQuest, Makeover Monday, and she's actually the co-host of Games Night Viz. She's also recently launched her own website and blog, so you can go over to visualendgame.wixsite.com to read that and check out her content. And you can find her on Twitter at visual_endgame. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tina for her presentation. Take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, John. And thanks everybody for having me and attending. So I am just going to make sure I share my screen. And we're off. So if anybody can't see this, just let me know. But yeah, so as John mentioned, I just recently started graphic design at PitchList. It's a fantasy baseball company that works with MLB. I've been in and around the business intelligence space since 2014. I'm getting my master's in data analytics and visualization from MICA, so Maryland Institute College of Art. And then I just added my design style. So my design style is really about inspiring, amazing, and sharing my passion through design. So as mentioned, there is a new site, my portfolio site. It does cover some of these visualizations from Tableau, but I've also got some stuff on technique in there, and then I will soon be adding my picture list content as well. Some of you are probably most familiar with the Squid game dashboard that I worked with Brian Moore from Boston TUG on. So you might recognize my work from that if not anything else. So today we're just going to go over design process, why having a design process is important, how to create your own design process. I'm going to walk you through an example of an effective execution of my own process, as well as one that was not as effective. And then how it really opens you to more opportunities. So I'm going to get into fonts here a little bit. Following that, I just always like to offer up some very quick checklists and then Q&A if there's time. So moving into this, if you've read my blog recently or you've seen some of my Iron Viz posts, you might have seen this, this picture, and this is my personal design process. So I break out mine into 3 key areas: ideation and planning, cleaning and raw dev, and then fit, finish, and UAT. Then these boxes within each stage, they switch order sometimes, but really the themes are what hold true. So it just kind of depends on what I'm designing. But imagine if you had something like this mapped out, and then think about how much time it would save you to have this and then create your visualization. Whether it's literally saving you time in execution or mentally saving you time in thinking about execution, there's an opportunity here to really help open yourself up for different opportunities of creating. One analogy I really like to think about here is if I drove to work every day for a week, but I had to take a different route every single day, and I wasn't allowed to use an app or a map to find where I was going, I would have so much extra stress in that process, even though I knew what the end result was going to be, was me arriving at work. And the same thing can be said if you're thinking about your design process, because it allows you to just open your mind up to everything else because you know where you're going to go next. And it gives you that option to be more creative. I'm not condoning not paying attention while driving, but it definitely makes it less stressful if you know where you're going. So I'm going to move into some key areas for how to create your design process yourself. These are really the 4 that I like to base off. So there's the actual design, there's creating a list of your design, and then there's categorizing and refining and repeating. So the first 2 that we're really going to touch on are the designing and creating your list. These 2 go hand in hand because you need to have something to create so that you can take stock of what you're doing. And in order to do this, you really just want to start simple. So a good example is if you want to go to Makeover Monday, and instead of creating something new, you pick one and you just replicate it. So it's not something that's a huge cognitive load for you, but it's enough that you have to think about what you might do next and how those stages might take place. And then while you're doing that, you want to create your list of what exactly you're doing, no matter how minuscule each piece of it feels. So what'd you do first? As soon as you picked your item, did you start with your narrative? Okay, then what? Did you download the data? Then what? Did you clean the data? And you want to just keep thinking of it like, then what? And then writing that down. And it could be a really long list, and that's exactly what you want, because then you're going to get into categorization. And from there, you're going to really just start to understand, where do all these things fit into place? And you might find that the order that you took after you categorize it was really just all over the place. I know for me, I wound up shifting a lot of things around before I created mine because I wasn't doing everything in the most efficient way. But this way, you'll be able to understand what you're doing to be able to categorize it. You can't do that unless you make the list. So after you do that, you could just go into refining and repeating, right? So now you have this list, you categorized it. You want to start to think about what's the right order for executing this, and then you take on another visualization. So it could be the exact same one you started with. You could start to implement it with another Makeover Monday or something, and there's other visualizations. I know back to basics, there's opportunities there, but you just want to use something that's not overly cumbersome just to start out, and then you can get into it as you go deeper. But this is really important because now this time through, you want to start to do it with your design list in mind. This way you'll be able to uncover if you have any gaps. Are you getting stuck anywhere? And then you'll be able to tweak it further, repeat it, and so on. One thing I want to caveat here is that if you find that you're getting stuck somewhere, you really should take stock of why you're getting stuck. Is it because it doesn't fit in that place in the order, or is it because you are not energized by what you're doing? The reason why I make this distinction is because you're not going to be energized by every part of the process. I don't love every single aspect of creating a visualization. Honestly, for me, the design is the most fun part of it, starting to do more of the art side of it. But the data, I start to get a little bit bored when I'm doing that. So what I do for me personally is I push through it because I've seen how effective it is for me to not do rework if I do that. That might not work for you. You have to see what works for you in terms of where can I intersperse bouts of energy with the things I don't like as much. If you have an entire week's worth of work and it's all things you don't like doing, or they're not your favorite, you're going to run out of steam before you hit the end of your design. So it's just important to note which ones are not in the right place or things that you might not love. And then figuring out what works for you on how to best organize that. So for the example of what went well, I am going to talk about the IronViz, my IronViz entry. I'm not going to show it in Tableau because I'm still not done with it, but I will show my Figma board at like a really zoned out view. And I will be talking about the content of what I'm doing. So I just want to provide that for awareness that we're going to talk about IronViz for a couple of minutes here. So as everyone, I very quickly started to panic about the timeline of execution as well as the topic. For me, art form, my favorites are really around movies, TVs, video game, but I like to incorporate a lot of imagery into that because I think it adds another layer of familiarity. So to reduce copyright infringement, I decided to go with music. So about 6 months ago, I had already had some of my music already downloaded from Spotify, so I just needed a little bit more. And then I was ready to go. As everyone, we only had 3 weeks, so I needed to figure out what I wanted to do to organize my process correctly. And every week, I took on one of those 3 buckets of my design process. So week 1 was ideation and planning. And as you can see from here, I went out of order. And then style guide, I actually didn't even do that. And I'm probably going to move that to a different section in my process after going through this exercise. So for step 1, I really needed to get that narrative down. And I did a lot of that on paper. So you won't see that example-wise today. But I wanted to create the story. I wanted to be able to identify what that narrative is and make sure that it was really strong. And the best way I know how to do that, is through the story arc here on the top right from Storytelling with Data. That's Cole Nussbaumer and Affleck's, her theory. So that is my preferred way, but there are so many different elements out there on how to create narratives that you just have to find the one that works best for you. Following that, I really got into that step 2, which is the research, the EDA, figuring all of that out. Like I said, I had some of the data already, so I knew what I wanted to do with it. I just needed to figure out how to execute it after I had that narrative. So after that, week 2 was really about cleaning and raw dev. So this one really went off like without a hitch. If I had to pick one of the weeks that went off really well, it was week 2, because every single piece of my process worked really well. So I had a piece of the wireframe, then I would clean the data, do the raw viz for it, and then go to the calculations if I needed to, add in the placeholders, and then go back to the wireframe for the next part of the viz. So it happened very formulaically, and it worked really well. And then this last piece, which I'm still in currently, from a formatting perspective and some refinement, it also went as I expected. These are the type of things that they kind of flow better. I think the hardest part of your process is that first stage and figuring out what's the best way to do it. And as you can see, I really revisited the style guide at this point instead. So if I were to show you what my Figma board looked like, you might say that it was a little messy looking, a little chaotic, but to me, this is super organized because when I'm doing something and I start to rework, refine, swirl on it without my design process, you would have seen this black board here about 4 different times because I just continue to iterate. I copy and paste a lot. I do a lot of, it gets very chaotic, so it gets very messy. But you can see up here in this top part, my ideation and planning stage happened very easily, very quickly. I got my colors in there. I got my inspiration for different elements. And then the fit, finish, and UAT is here in the yellow box. Towards the bottom, I had the pieces that I drew, pieces that I created. And what you don't see is that middle week, the raw dev, because that turned into this fit, finish, UAT stage and the final. So that's just to show how efficiently it went, because I didn't have to redo anything or continue to reconstruct it along the way. So total duration is going to be about 3 weeks once I finish it and submit it. But so about 3 weeks worth of work to get out all of this, and it's a lot cleaner. So if I move to show you what one of my less efficient processes look like, exactly what I mentioned, right? So look at all the times that this was repeated. And if you can tell what this was the Squid Game dashboard that I worked with Brian on. So Brian was working on all of the data components as well as the animations. He did all of the really amazing work with the pieces of the games, and then I worked on the design. And we weren't in a rush, so we didn't have the same time crunch. But with what I did, I decided I don't need a design process. Brian's got the data side. I love the design, so I'm just gonna go for it. And I think probably by the last 2 weeks, Brian was probably saying, stop changing everything, because I just kept making new iterations of it until we finally landed on the last one. But you can see like this section here, which is really just different fragments, was the original. Then I jumped to this version with this white piece in there. Then I jumped to the one on the left. Then I jumped to the one on the far right. Then back to this one. So I just kept jumping all over the place. And what I could have done to avoid that, even though I wasn't going to be doing the data component, was still do my story arc, because it would have helped me to figure out what I really wanted to make sure we incorporated in there. And I think our 8 weeks total duration, while I said we weren't in a rush, we probably could have gotten it done in 6 if I was a little more organized along the way. So in terms of examples, if you're looking for more examples on this, more detail, on my website, I have 2 more examples of this exact correlation. So a time that I did it really well and a time that I didn't do it so well. And that's all in the blog post about designing for effectiveness, if you want to see another view of that. But yeah, so what I really want to show though is point A versus point B. So when you have your design process down, you have so much more time to empower yourself to incorporate new elements, learn new things, or work on the things that you might not be energized by. So for example, for me, one of the things I should probably learn is how to do the data work and data compiling faster, because I run out of steam very quickly there. So I'm just going to walk you through like some of the different elements that are available from a design aspect. And when you think about all of them together, there's a lot there when you add also your design process and the execution, right? Like we have to actually design the visualization. We have to think about our font. We have to prepare the data. We have to prepare the dashboard itself. Sorry, my screen. We have to think about coding potentially, even Tableau prep for those pieces of it. We also, I'm having some fun animation unintentionally in here. We have to think about accessibility. Are we creating something for an audience that we want it to be accessible to? Excuse me. We have to think about design techniques. We can think of, do we want to incorporate a new design technique like glass morphism? And then the tools, right? So do we want to use just Tableau? Do we want to learn Figma? Do we want to use Adobe Illustrator, R, Python? There's just so many tools. But today I'm just going to give you a quick crash course on font, just as a way to really think about, are you, after you have your design process available, are you open to thinking about one of these techniques? Maybe it's font. So I have a little bit here that I'll share, and then we'll just get into checklists and Q&A. So from a font perspective, font is really important to developing a successful visualization. Whether it seems like it or not, it might not be the star of the show, but if you have font that is meant to support your narrative and your visualization and it doesn't resonate with your audience, it might create a missed opportunity for the entire visualization. So there's about 4 key categories that I think of when I think about font. Font psychology, color, proximity, size, and style, inclusion and accessibility, as well as narrative flow. I'm going to talk about the first 2. I would love to talk about the second 2, but they are definitely their own presentations in themselves. So there's more research I want to be able to do on those before I get into that. But from a font psychology perspective, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the emotion that you feel when you see something in a specific font. And it's the same type of resonation that you want someone to think about when they're doing when they're looking at your visualization. So how are they actually feeling when they're reading your text? Do you want to use different fonts for your headers, first paragraphs, or callouts? Those are all things to consider from a psychology perspective. And we'll go through a short exercise here too. So very simply, hi, how are you? Basic sentence here, right? But how do these 3 different ways of seeing this sentence make you feel? Top left is very modern. It's clean. It might make you feel calm. When you read, hi, how are you? Maybe you feel a little happy. When you see the middle one, you might immediately think of paper correspondence because of the serifs, which are the little wings on the letters, but it also feels really formal. So you might just like, hi, how are you, right? Like you might just change your demeanor when you read something in a more formal way than that first one. And then the last one, I like to use this for horror things. So to me, it's a little creepy, and I like that depending on the context. But yeah, it gives you a very different feeling than the first 2, right? And if we take that a step further and we think about it with the style of how we're developing it, I've got 3 examples here. What I want to say is I have exaggerated these for the purposes of this exercise. Obviously, 1 sentence, this is a lot for any 1 sentence, but if you think about this in the scheme of an entire visualization, that's what I want you to kind of take away from this. So the very first one has some differences in thickness as well as spacing, which time and place is great for that, but spacing can change the pace that someone can read at. So, hi, how are you, right? It's a different emphasis on the word based off the spacing. This middle one is probably the most commonly used because it's the easiest to really resonate with. It's adding some thickness, so the bolding of the word R, and then using color for emphasis. And then the last one is 2 different texts, right? So 2 different fonts, I apologize. Hi and you are 1 font, and then how are is a different font. And that's fine if you want to use them, but this is where you start to think about what is the purpose of introducing another font? Because how are being in different font, you might have someone that's starting to think, well, what do I need to know about this font that's different than the other font? The same way you think of legends and colors. There's an association to a font that you've introduced as part of your narrative. So you want to think about what is really the reason that someone has to learn about a new font. It's a new level of cognitive load for them to really digest that. So my suggestion on really just getting into more about fonts and thinking about this is just start small. Stick to 1 to 3 fonts in total. If you want to go the 3 route, I would recommend using them for different relationships. So a header, a paragraph, and a call out. Those are the easiest ways to differentiate your fonts. If you want to use one all the way throughout, you can just adjust size and thickness. For my Iron Biz submission, I actually used 1 font the entire time. I did not use anything else. And I also kind of challenged myself to do that because I wanted to see what type of emotions I could evoke with just 1 font. Play with the emphasis techniques on your fonts. Instead of using too many of them, this is a great way to just see how emotion and psychology changes without introducing all of these different fonts along the way. And then save what you're doing for different purposes. It will be really helpful as you get into it more. What I create for picture list, I have a very specific font for than what I use for video games. than what I use for horror things, right? So it just saves you time along the way if you keep your combinations. And then ask viewers for feedback. How did it make them feel? What did this font make them feel? And it's a weird question at first if someone's not used to answering that, but it is really helpful context to have if you can get some good reception out of a response. So just to wrap, as I mentioned, both of these are going to be, they're both available on my blog, but these are the two checklists I mentioned. So just recovering everything that we spoke about. On the left is a checklist for creating your own design process. And then on the right, it's really about just how to get into more of the font game. But I just wanted to share them. So if you have any questions, if we don't get to them today, feel free to just ask me on Twitter. Happy to help. And again, just thank you everyone for your time today. And yeah, happy visiting.
Tina, thank you. That was so much good. We really appreciate you coming on and sharing all your knowledge with us. That was really great.
Thank you.
Taking a quick scan at the chat. I don't see a question right now, but you know, if anything comes up, you guys can pass. We can pass it on to you. See, it was too good of a presentation. There's no questions at all. So, all right. Heading on to our next topic. Oh, let me share again. Hang on. Okay. So as we mentioned, or as Tina mentioned, all this great content is on her website and blog. So head over to there, check that out, and make sure to connect with her on Twitter. On to the debate. First, let me introduce our debaters. We have 4 super talented people joining us today. We're very lucky to have these guys involved. So let's start clockwise. We've got, first up, Autumn Battani. We'll talk about the motion in a minute, but she will be arguing for the motion in favor of using Figma along with Tableau at work. So Autumn is a Tableau consultant with PH Data. At PH Data, she is the Director of Early Career Development Program. She was a 2020 Tableau Public featured author and a 2021 Tableau Social Ambassador, and also a co-lead of Diversity in Data. Autumn, thank you so much for joining us. Also, this time on the against the motion side is Jennifer Dawes. So Jen is a senior analyst at Macy's, a Tableau Public featured author, a 6-time Viz of the Day recipient, and prior to working with Macy's, she worked as a human resources generalist with Unifund. She's a volunteer with Girls Plus Data and co-founder of herdata.net with her partner in crime, Danushki. Then also on Autumn's team of arguing for the motion, we have Robert Janzik. He works with JP Morgan Chase, and at JP Morgan, he's part of the Tableau COE and works as a user interface designer. So before that, he was an analyst and was able to fully transition full-time into working with design, something that he's passionate about sharing, and is, believes that everybody can make that transition if they want to in their career. So he also, definitely have to mention, is the creator of a Figma plugin called the Tableau UI Kit. And the link below, I highly recommend you guys go check this out. It's an incredible library of resources to help you speed up your Tableau design process with so many great Figma additions, templates. It's just an incredible resource. Go check that out for sure. And another face you guys may know if you're a longtime Boston Tug member, Dustin Cabral. He is a principal consultant with Cleartelligence. And at Cleartelligence, he's the data visualization practice lead. He is a former co-lead of the Boston Tug and an author, a course author for e-learning platforms teaching Tableau. And if you know Dustin, you know that he is a longtime lover of all things Tesla. So again, thank you so much to all of our panelists. let me jump into a little bit of how this is going to work. All right, so the debate, as I said, is around the combination of Tableau and Figma in the workplace. All right, so the two teams will be arguing either for or against this motion statement. So let me read it out loud one time for you guys. The statement is, it is a net benefit for companies to incorporate Figma into their Tableau dashboard design and development processes. The panels will get into what that means, what some of those processes are. But the key here, we're talking about a net benefit at work. Okay, we know a lot of people use this to create simple backgrounds for their Tableau public work, but here we're talking about using it at work, right? So when I say net benefit, there are always benefits to a software or it wouldn't exist, but incorporating that into the workplace, there are costs, right? So I think the question is, do those benefits or do they not outweigh the costs? All right, so that's where this conversation will probably go. So this is going to work in three parts. Part one, we're going to ask that the audience answer a poll question. All right, so if everybody could open a browser and go to www.menti.com, that's MENTI.com, and then it will ask you for a code. It's this simple 8-digit code, 8855-4919. And then it will ask you if you, without knowing anything else yet from the panelists, if you agree or disagree with that motion statement, or if you don't have a stance on it yet, that's perfectly okay. You can mark it as undecided. Part two will be the panel discussion. So we'll kick it off with some simple questions, and then we're just going to let the conversation go where it goes. All right. So they are going to try, if you agreed with their side of the conversation, they're going to try to keep your vote. If you disagree, they're going to try to sway your vote. If you are undecided, they're going to try to bring you onto their team. All right. And then at the end of all of this, we're going to poll the audience again. So please, if you voted the first time, do your best to stick around, because this is how we're going to decide who wins. So we're going to poll the audience again, and the winning team will be the one that gained the most votes in their favor. All right. So let me hop over to the poll. So I don't have a stopwatch on this. We're going to let it go for a minute or two, let everybody log in and give their thoughts. And looks like a large number undecided, and that's okay. It'll be our job to change those to agrees or disagrees. And by the way, how this will work, after you vote, please leave that browser tab open, okay? Because after the vote, I will change it to the next slide, which is the next round of voting. And so everyone will use that same web address. So instead of having to type it in again, just leave that tab open again. And then when I switch it over, you will then be able to vote the second time around. And, you know, I guess I would say let's stop the voting once the presentation or once the panel discussion begins. I think I can kill the voting and then we'll pick it back up. So let's not vote in the middle of the conversation. All right, we've got 57 votes in. We're holding steady. I see your question, Autumn. The answer is no. We will not be debating the benefit of a pie chart. All right, I think we're good on the votes. So let me stop sharing and we will ask our panelists to hop on here.
Hello.
Hello, Robert.
Hey.
Dustin.
What up?
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Jen, Autumn. All right, I hear everybody loud and clear. That's great. Thank you again for joining. All right. So like I said, we all know about Figma backgrounds. Many of us know that that's a popular thing, but at work, there are many other benefits. So I think maybe let's start off with asking, I'm gonna send it to Autumn, all right? And then we'll see where it goes from there. That's right. So unmute yourself, ma'am. Let's educate the audience just for a second about some of the ways that you can use Figma in the workplace.
Oh, good. A softball. I got this one. The main way that I use Figma in the workplace is to prototype dashboards. So I work for a data consulting firm, work with lots of different clients. Not all clients are familiar with Tableau, which is a product that I end up building the solution in. So pre-jumping straight in and building something for them, I use Figma to help them envision how it's going to come together. If I can get into a little bit of the points already, or one of the reasons that this is great is because sometimes I don't know exactly what they're looking for. You know, if every time you talk to a stakeholder, they said, yes, I would like a bar chart in the top right corner and a table below that, that would be awesome. You can dig right in, but some people are really new to data products and data visualization products. So it's been great for me to leverage Figma to say, here's what it could look like. How do you feel? Solicit some feedback and then go from there.
Excellent. All right. So, and you guys are free to jump in at any time. If you want to agree, if you want to disagree, fire away. Right. I'm just going to try to shepherd the conversation as it lulls.
I think I've seen some of the stuff that Autumn has posted, so I can't disagree that everything that she's posted on prototyping in Figma is amazing. One, I guess, trade-off to that could be learning other tools is always going to be a benefit to individuals, but I think organizationally, we could also create and have my organization created templates with some dummy data that you can prototype. So I guess my counterpoint would be you can do lots of different things with a lot of different tools. I think the reason I tend to go with Tableau is it's nice when there's a template or a dashboard established and you're just swapping data, right? You're able to kind of demo it to the client or the end user. This is kind of what we can work with or what we can do. You can talk about it. Prototyping, I think, is, I guess, key. And then from there, you're able to quickly swap the data in and out. And I still love you, Adam.
So, I think before I get into any debate topics, I think it would be good to talk about what Figma is in the first place, because I think 50%, 57% of the people were undecided, and I think a large portion of the community don't even know what it is. So I'll do like a quick spiel just to get like a base so everyone here like in this chat understands. So Figma is a web-based collaborative prototyping tool that companies use to build prototypes. And in my world, the design world, so I'm a user interface designer, I use Figma 90 to 95% of my day. So I'm using Figma to create and update design systems, create prototypes for and wireframes for websites, applications, etc. So whatever company, everyone that's in this chat, whatever company you're working for, there is either a UI, UX team that's designing all of your applications for you, or if you're a smaller company, you're probably outsourcing that to some design consulting firm essentially. And there's a high likelihood that in today's day and age that those people are using Figma. And they definitely could be using something like Adobe XD or Sketch, but by far and away the last 2 years specifically, Figma has really skyrocketed to be the tool of choice for designers. And if you don't believe me, you can just go to Google and look up 2021 design survey, and that's like 1,500 designers that get surveyed across the entire world. They talk about like what tools they use for prototyping and whiteboarding, all of those things. And by far and away, Figma is the most used. There's a few reasons for that. The community is amazing, the same way that the Tableau community is amazing. Sometimes I feel like being in the Tableau community, I think sometimes we think that other communities can't be as large or as active and excited about the tool, but I can guarantee that Figma is. And all the features that they push out continuously is really exciting, and their focus on design systems is really big, and they just did a design system conference this year, first of its kind. So there's a lot of reasons why Figma has kind of taken over. So I just wanted to lay the groundwork of why this isn't PowerPoint and Tableau and not, or XD and Tableau, or Sketch and Tableau, why it's Figma and Tableau, right? Because Figma is essentially the top dog right now, right? So that's my spiel. Whoever wants to.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I can go next. Then I'll preface this by saying that I actually like Figma. So I'm not anti-Figma, but I'm going to put my consultant hat on. And this is the same argument that's been used against things like Tableau, because all day, every day, I'm working with Tableau and Alteryx and other partners to help sell their software, right? And anytime you want a new software in a company, there's going to be resistance. Now, part of that is cost, right? And Figma, while it does have a free version, for enterprise and companies, it's going to cost money to be able to share your files and have something that's really cohesive where you can work together. There are probably ways that you could do it with the free versions on the cheap, just like you used to be able to do with Tableau Desktop and file shares and things like that. But if you really want it for business, you're going to end up paying for it. Not that it's that expensive, but it is a cost, right? And it's a subscription cost. It's not a one-time cost, which most things are nowadays, except for Alteryx, which is a different story. But I would say that's probably one of the main barriers, is that it is an extra cost. And in addition to that, it is possibly a security concern for some companies. Now, I'm not saying it's not a secure system. It is web-based. I'm sure it has encryption and all that good stuff. But you guys know IT, and IT has a tendency, even when there's not real data in something, that IP or something like that will be floating out there in the internet for other people to potentially hack or look at and things like that. So I would say that Figma is a great tool. I really like it. I'm probably going to be using it extensively in the next year. And I hate this because it's an argument against Tableau and for something like Power BI. Tools like PowerPoint, people use them. They all know them, just like they all know Excel, right? Very low barrier to entry to get somebody to use that to help with their design. Not that it's anywhere near as good as Figma is with all its customization, things like that. But other tools that are just built in already on people's computers have an inherent advantage to something new. So I will say that cost, security, and just familiarity are all things that are going to go against Figma, at least in the beginning. Although it is a leading tool and probably will be something that gets paired up with tools like Tableau and Power BI going forward, I would say those are sort of the three main things that I think about.
I will add, in terms of the Tableau side, like I am not against other tools. Figma, in fact, Gafar talked to Janezic and I on her data and was giving us a tutorial of how to get around Figma. Autumn, I constantly am looking at everything that you put out and others using Figma. I think it's amazing what people can do. I think for me, in the way that I work in my business dashboards, it's hard to bring in a secondary tool. I'm somebody that I want to get the data into Tableau, lay it out, start thinking through what I need. And that's just kind of how I work. So that's more of a personal choice than it is a business. Sorry, kids are being loud. Than it is a business reason. But I will agree. I think from a business perspective, when you're going to hire, looking for somebody with that skill set of data and Tableau could be a lot easier than trying to find somebody that you can quickly get ramped up into data, Tableau, and now also Figma. Again, it's a great tool. I just, from my personal work environment, haven't seen the use for it. Personally, on Tableau Public, it might be different, but that's where all of our experiences are different, right? Depending on, I guess, the industry that you're working in.
We do have a question in the chat. is there any concern of providing visuals in Tableau that Tableau might not support? You use a Figma wireframe, or that your data doesn't support?
I think that's a great question, and I think it really depends on the team that you have. So for me, for example, I use it in my workplace. I am both the designer and the developer. So I never designed anything in the wireframe in Figma that I didn't know already that Tableau could create, and I didn't know that I could create. There are often times where the people doing the designing aren't the people doing the developing. So I would say that really is going to require a strong relationship and communication between those groups. But I think that's something that should already be in place if you have the people designing something not being the people who's also doing the development. So I think it's a valid concern and something that does come up often. But I think it's something that's easily solvable, either if you're doing both, in my case, or if you communicate, maybe what the boundaries are with someone who's doing the designing if they're not doing the developing.
Yeah, I want to go back to the cost a little bit. And just for clarity, there's absolutely a cost associated with it if this is more of an organizational thing that you want to start to implement, right? So there's absolutely, there's a free Figma that you can use. It's capped at 1 team and 3 projects. So for example, if you go to that 4th project, you can't, or if you're in an organization, you want to create, let's say you have an Alteryx COE or something, and you want to create an Alteryx COE team and you want a Tableau team, you can't do that in the free version. You would have to move to the professional version. And then once you start going to those other versions, there's absolutely a cost associated with the editor, right? So there was a point earlier from Dustin about, sharing a potential cost associated with sharing. I think you said something similar to that. I've done this before when I was creating the Tableau UI kit. I shared the kit with a few people and made them editors, where there is a cost associated with editors. So I was paying for like 5 people to be editors on my own credit card. And I messed that up where instead I needed to make them viewers, which is free, right? So you can have just one editor, you just pay for it, and then you have multiple viewers. And from pushing the Tableau UI kit out, I have seen like in my face teams coming to me all the time interested in matching up Figma and prototyping with Tableau, right? And so consulting firms will say, hey, they always have questions like, hey, we want to use this, but can we share this to our end clients? And the answer is yes, because you can always just share it as a viewer and they can view it and they can see all those things. It's just they can't create things in Figma, right? So you can share it with other people outside of your team. And so obviously there's above professional, there's organization, but just some quick clarity on some of the sharing and the pricing. So.
Yeah, and it might be something where, there's obviously different levels to all the tools, right? Even Tableau, right? We've got viewers and explorers and creators, and there's always a stratification of like what levels of who needs what and things like that. Same thing with Alteryx. We might have a client that has 2,000 Tableau creator roles, but they only have 100 Alteryx designers, right? So I'm sure Figma will fall into that in some way. Does everybody who have Tableau need Figma? Probably not, at least the editor, right? But maybe they need viewer, right? To share templates and things like that. So yeah, I think, and this is a tricky thing, no matter what software we're selling as consultants, it's just the cost associated with it. You really got to wrap your head around it and figure out to what extent do you need what level of involvement and accessibility to a tool like that. So not saying that companies will just outright say no because of cost, but it's something that they just need to understand who needs what and how much will it cost and what can you do and what can't you do with certain versions of it. So, it's definitely one of the things that hits you immediately. Some companies don't care, right? The cost of Figma would be trivial, right? But they might hit on security, which I saw you sent the link on that. And I am like absolutely sure Figma is fine. But you know how it is. Certain organizations are just going to go and they're going to say, oh, no, it's cloud-based. We're all on-prem. Sorry. And I've had this with Tableau too. And we're like, no, it's like you can host your Tableau server on, AWS. It's fine. And they're like, no. We still have an on-prem with like 80 cores. And you're like, this is not 2012. Like you can be in the cloud and it's secure. It's fine. So there's just always those conversations. And, I think it's a balancing act, but the barriers to Figma aren't unique to Figma. I think they're barriers to any new up and coming technology. In 5 years, when everybody has Figma, it's going to be like a no-brainer. Who knows? They get bought by somebody else, or they just become so ubiquitous that people are like, oh yeah, it's like Salesforce, right? They're like, yeah, that's fine. You know what I mean? I think it's probably the stage of maturity, which probably has something against it. Although, like you said, the last couple of years, it's definitely gotten a lot bigger.
Yeah, and like you just mentioned, this is like the way beginning, right? Like using a tool like Figma where we are asking a lot from people, right? Like the Tableau UI Kit, I don't want to keep going back to that, but that's asking a lot of analysts, right? Like analysts and data visualization designers aren't as familiar with componentizing things and using design systems and styles and using these features in Figma, like advanced features like auto layout and different things like that. And I'm well aware that this is the beginning and it's asking a lot of people to do some of these things in Figma. But I do envision it's just going to get bigger and bigger, right? So it's just time thing, I suppose.
The one thing I was going to mention, this probably takes the conversation in a whole different direction, so don't shoot me. But the one thing that came to mind when I thought about Figma is one, I want to learn, because I think being able to utilize a tool that can help me lay out my design for a data visualization would be fantastic. My brain doesn't work like that. Like I mentioned, I'm somebody that kind of wants to get in. I have to make a mess to kind of see the data and the visualization comes through it. So having one tool has just been my style. Getting to my point, I promise. I think the thing that comes to mind to me right now during Iron Viz is when people are using these secondary tools to do various parts of the Iron Viz, while it can really enhance the data visualization, I've seen in the past where that can hurt people in rounds of the judging, only because you're judged for the work that you're doing in Tableau. And so I try to take it as a challenge to Tableau. In fact, when I was working at Unifund with Kevin Flurlage and Danushki De Oliveira, we often had a game of challenging Jeff Schaefer. If we wanted to do something in Tableau where Tableau was just basically not built for, we would take it to him. Like, okay, so Tableau can't do this. And it became an all-day challenge for him to figure out how we could get there. Now, granted, I don't want to spend all day using a tool that just isn't built to do some of the things I want to do. Brian Moore published that data visualization, what was that, just a few days ago, blew my mind. And I still keep coming back to it and playing with it. That is taking Tableau to that next level that you just never could have expected Tableau could do that. I think it takes individuals like us, the community, to continuously to push that boundary for that tool to continuously apply improvements to it to meet us in the middle, right? Where maybe we aren't having to use so many different tools outside of Tableau, and suddenly the design options are all in one. I think I made like 2 points. I'm not really sure. Sorry.
I don't know. I feel like you're making a point for Figma. I feel like it's a great way to be pushing Tableau to those boundaries to say, hey, you know what, this is close. What I made in Figma is close, but this extra little bit, you could get that extra way if you just implemented that into the Tableau tool. I think it would be great to do everything entirely in the tool. I think already that just doesn't happen. You know, we use different data warehouses and manipulation tools. Like there's just some things we need to do outside. But I think when it comes to, like I said, prototyping and that aspect, I would still argue that all of the stuff is in Tableau at the end. But when it comes to, I guess, including background images, which is in my mind a separate thing, that does sort of blur the lines about what you're doing in tool versus out of tool. But I don't know. I'm just saying, I think you and Dustin are actually on our side.
You're funny. Jackie just asked a question that I'm interested in myself. So to Autumn and to Robert, do you guys explore the data in Tableau before prototyping? Because I think that's where I get hung up on thinking about prototyping and thinking about, you know, one of my experiences or like I think myths of joining the data community was all of these fantastic people just must have this day. They wake up, they have the data, and they create it all in one sitting, and they know exactly what the design looks like. And I might have that misconception of people that use Figma. You must just turn on Figma, lay it out, and it's perfect. So do you guys pull the data into Tableau first, or what is your process?
That is actually exactly how I do it. I do just open up Figma and bing, bam, boom, it is perfect. And I go, no. It's a lot of iteration. And to answer Jackie's question, I don't, in the type of work that I do, I don't always have access to the data that's going to be in the dashboard at the time the engagement starts. I would love that. Sometimes they haven't even started collecting it. Sometimes they're still working on cleaning it. And that's another reason why I love Figma, because it doesn't prevent progress. I don't need to wait until the data is all together, until all of the questions have been answered. I can start and say, hey, you know, I know these are the metrics that we're looking to see. This is some of the cuts that we're looking to see it by. Let's start envisioning what that's going to look like while those other pieces are coming together. It's also a great opportunity to help inform what that looks like. So as we're building that, we can communicate to data engineers, hey, I need this at this level to support some of the things that they're looking for. It's been great for that too, to help decide what the structure is. That way, when you get to the point where the data is ready, however long that may take, and sometimes it's a very long time, it's exactly what you need to support the analysis that the stakeholders are looking to do.
I think that's a really good question, right? Like exploring the data before you start creating your prototypes. I've had people come to me with that exact same concern, right? And their flow is generally, you know, I want to explore the data first, and then I think about the charts, and then I do some design stuff. And I do agree that if that's your flow, quickly just jump into Tableau, get a general sense of what the data is. But from my opinion, a big advantage for prototyping before you jump into Tableau is you're avoiding tech, right? That's why there's design teams, right? Like you're avoiding tech. Tech is very complicated. That's why, you know, if you're going straight, let's say you're building a website or application or something like that, if you're going straight from gathering requirements to the end result, I can guarantee you're going to tell in 2 seconds that an engineer built that end result. And I see this all day, right? I have this really good quote that I use in presentations. It's, if you think good design is expensive, you should look at the cost of bad design. So really what that's saying is that when you're going to the end result down the line, you're probably it's going to be more costly, whether in financial terms or in time terms. It's going to be more costly than it is if you spent the time prototyping and making sure the design is great, you're getting key stakeholder sign off, you know, everyone, you can't do finger pointing anymore because their sign off from your stakeholders. And then you jump into the dev work, which in this instance would be Tableau. But your original question is really good, right? So I've also had people that said that exact same thing. Then they came back to me weeks later saying, oh, actually, I'm finding that the law of diminishing returns is hitting me with like exploring the data first, where they found that just going to the prototype first got them like 95 or 99% of the way there about the visualization that they were going to create. So whatever your flow is good, but you know.
So my question is, sorry, Dustin, we talk about prototyping specifically. What are the pros and cons of prototyping something in Tableau versus Figma? I can't speak to the Figma side, but certainly, as I mentioned, when I think of prototyping or having a template or having a set of dashboards that you can showcase to an end user.
I didn't know.
That goes along with what Jennifer was saying, with an audience. Can't a hand-drawn prototype be just as good at?
Yeah, I guess it's like generally like Figma versus everything else, prototype-wise, advantages type deal.
Right. Yeah. So let me do a quick rundown of the different forms of design. So there could be generally the way that I do it. If I'm creating an application, I start with the sitemap, which is just the general layout of the different organizational things. I jump to a wireframe, which is generally, and this is the area that you could do it on paper, and a wireframe is just your general layout, right? Like I just use gray, light gray squares, just the general layout of where things are going to be. Then once I get key stakeholder sign off, I jump into high-five prototyping, and high-five prototyping is basically a Tableau UI kit, right? You're adding fonts and colors and actually putting specific design things to the prototype, right? And then you get sign off, and then you give it to, let's say, a Tableau developer, which you can consider to be a dev. That's your dev, right? They're creating it in the end product or end tool. I don't really prototyping in Tableau, in my mind, really isn't a thing. It's just the end result. It's kind of like building your end product in Python and saying it's a prototype. So it's not really a prototype. It's more like you're just jumping to the last stage.
But I guess what makes it a prototype? If we're wanting a dashboard or something that looks like the end result just for demo purposes, my question then, what does Figma have superior to, I think Kevin mentioned, PowerPoint or Tableau? Really, you're just creating that visual guide or reference as this is the direction we want to jointly go.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a million features. I don't want this to be like a Figma crash course, and I could probably do a bunch of presentations on that. But we're starting to get to more fluid ways of designing things. So in my head, I use Figma all the time, but I also use Tableau sometimes. When I was using Tableau, I'm like, wow, the design features, it's so fluid. I went to Figma, used that 90% of the times, and then I go back to Tableau. I'm like, wow, this is pretty clunky overall. In terms of design, right? Like Tableau is not a design tool. It's a data visualization and data analytics tool that you use, and there's some design features, right? But the fluidity in which you can create designs is way better in Figma. There's a lot more features. You can start doing things like auto layout, which is basically flex, more or less flex in coding terms, and you can basically give the design in Figma and hand it straight off to the devs, and they know how to build it in CSS and things like that. But the Tableau UI Kit, for example, is getting into things like design systems, right? You have components, you have instances of components you have libraries, right? The Tableau UI Kit library, you can just drag and drop things. So it's improving your design flow, right? So that's why Figma is such a big thing. It's definitely more advanced features that I can't talk all about here, but yeah. So
yeah, and were you gonna go, Autumn? You can go if you want.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, I think it's hard for people who have never used Figma to understand the difference between Figma and PowerPoint, because you look at them and you're like, they both have shapes, they both have text, but as Robert's talking about, like the process you get to get there, the reusable components and things like that, the way it works in Figma is they can attach to like a parent one, so when you change one, it changes everything. You would have to hand update everything in PowerPoint if they said, you know what, we actually decided we don't want to use that color, we need to use this one. You're just going to have to go through and update that color every single place. You could do that in 2 clicks in Figma. So end to end, yeah, it might not seem that different, but the time it's going to take you, it's going to be significantly shorter in Figma than it is in PowerPoint once you skill up. Also, I love hand drawing things, but I think most of us are working remotely. I don't know how I would get something. I mean, I do love mailing. I'm a postcard lady myself, but hand drawn things is a great way to start, and sometimes I do just sketch it on a notebook, but as far as circulating that through an organization and 2 stakeholders to get their buy-in, I definitely think it needs to be digital, unfortunately, with where we are right now.
Sure. Yeah. And I guess the main thing that I would have to say at this point is just that I think Figma is a good fit for a certain population at organizations. I would say probably not the bulk of Tableau developers, right? If we had 100 developers, maybe Figma is a good fit for 20 of them, right? And not saying anybody on this call, right? Because if you're on a Boston user group call on a Friday in the middle of the day, then yeah, you're probably a good fit for a tool like this, right? You take it seriously, you want to get better at your design, you want to use the enhanced features and all that stuff. I would say organizations as a whole, not everybody who has a Tableau creator license, I would say most people aren't going to get that deep into it where they want to do that sort of work. Not that they couldn't benefit from templates and shared content and things like that, but even when we're doing development work and I'm working with a team of a couple thousand people who have creator licenses, sometimes the best you can get is giving them 4 or 5 background dashboard templates and saying like, hey guys, start with these, which, could be created in a bunch of different tools. And they may never see the power of a tool like a Figma or something else where you can go way deeper than that. You can, prototype, you can animate, you can do mock-ups, you can do all sorts of stuff that you can't do in the other tools. I guess I would say that just the audience is probably limited from the scope of an organization in the analytics space. Not that it's not useful, just that it will probably be a harder sell for the broader organization. So I think it's something that will end up in a lot of organizations, but the extent of it, I think will be more limited just because of appetite for learning a tool and wanting to go deep into it. It's hard to get that exposure depending on what group you're talking to.
All right, kids. Oh, sorry to cut you guys off. We could go all day, right? But we got to wrap this up. So I'm going to give each team an opportunity, 30 seconds, right? Fight for your side. I see the angst autumn, so I'm going to let you guys go first. Team 4, 30 seconds. Why should your business adopt Figma to use in conjunction with Tableau?
I think at the end of the day, businesses care about money, and money depends on time, and Figma can significantly cut down the time it takes to get from gathering requirements to delivering a solution. And so that would be my main argument for why you should adopt it. Rob, to you.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you are completely okay with hitting the glass ceiling and not going past what your team and organization can do, what you can show, what you can promote, then sure, totally stick with the tools you have. But if you're someone like me, I love new tools. If something comes out tomorrow that's better than Figma, I'm jumping to that tool because I'm a tech guy. I love the next big thing. But I think Figma really allows teams, organizations, enterprises to take their analytics workflow to the next level. And there's a lot of things in there, but I really think it helps you break the glass ceiling potential. So
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. All right, team against. Let's hear the argument.
So much to say. Go ahead, Dustin.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I agree it's a great tool and can help elevate your teams. I would also say that not that it's not something that's valuable, but I think it is going to be limited in its ability to impact large groups and large amounts of teams. People like Robert are few and far between, I would say, at organizations. You got 10,000 people, maybe there's 20 of him, right, who really jump on new stuff, hit it out of the park. And that's why people like that are superstars at companies. Not that you have to be a superstar to use Figma or anything like that. I think anybody on this call could use the tool effectively and be great at it. But it's all about temperament, mentality, your ability to learn new things and change and grow. Not saying that people can't do that. I'm just saying it's very difficult. And you might be able to get by, 75, 80% of the time using something you already got.
Perfect. Jen, last words?
I guess my final thought is like to say interest in learning Figma, if you have interest in learning other tools, doesn't in my book mean that you have to look at Tableau or other tools as failing in a certain area, right? Like you can use multiple tools in conjunction and have a greater gain maybe. I see that as being more applicable in my personal data viz experience rather than the business side, because kind of what Robert said, one point that I've seen, and certainly I've worked at companies with a lot of red tape. The challenge to constantly chasing that next best tool and chasing, okay, well, this is cool, I want to use it this week, is you're just not going to get in some work cultures, you're not going to have that support. That's not a cadence for all businesses, but I've worked at the organizations that work with what you've got. So I think it's just a challenge to my own self personally that for my business dashboards, I try to focus on the tools I'm given, and I try to focus on pushing Tableau to do what I want it to do rather than trying to re-engineer my work process. Again, not saying Figma is bad or Tableau is bad. It's for a business setting where I'm publishing to a Tableau server, I try to stick with Tableau.
Excellent. All right. Thank you all so much. Let me go back to the sharing. I'm going to bring up round 2 of the voting. So again, audience members, please head on over to menti.com. Use that code 88554919 and get your votes in. We're going to give this maybe a minute and see where it goes. While you guys are voting, I'm sounding like a broken record, but I'll tell you what, we've got some really high-powered, talented people on this conversation who could their time coming on and giving us. I think what I'm going to have to do is secretly have a stop time on this so you guys don't try to game it. It's a slight lead for the agrees. Keep in mind the difference between the first and second vote is going to tell us who won, not necessarily who ends up with the most votes in this poll.
Yeah, what's the stake? Do I get something super cool, like a weekend off?
Instead of Tableau swag, you can get Figma swag. Oh,
If the disagree, do we get free pro licenses of Figma?
Yeah, I'll pay for it. I got you.
Make me editor. That'd be cool.
You get a free account.
I like it.
in case you didn't see the chat, I said it was my birthday. I'm just saying.
Happy birthday.
But I'm just saying you should vote Tableau.
Nice. Nice.
I'm totally kidding. I'm not. I'm taking note of names.
I just saw that Salesforce buying Figma. So we get it done.
I mean, that gets to a point in the conversation that you guys brought up, right? I mean, how much do you just let a product do what it does best, right? And how much do you want something to become this bloated all-in-one, right? That's always the conversation with things like this.
You know what gets me that we didn't talk too much about is like for everyone that, like Autumn said, it's bing, bing, boom. If you have projects that come to you like that, I bow down. I struggle. And that's probably where I got caught into this conversation, because I really have to throw it all into Tableau and make a mess before I can figure out what I want to do. So
I think if it was really Bing, bing. For me, I probably wouldn't use Figma because I could just open Tableau and build it right away, and so I would have used something else. I think Figma does help me sort of work through, like, oh, you know what? I thought I was going to want this to be at the top or on the side, and I don't. I thought this was going to look good as a bar chart, and it doesn't. And I didn't have to spend the time writing the calcs and doing the formatting and updating the tooltips just to find out I'm not that happy with it. In Figma, I could build a bar chart in probably under 10 seconds, and then if I don't like it, it's like, cool. Done. Scrap it. What can we do now? So it takes me, like I said, less time overall. I wish I had the bing bang booms.
I want bing bang boom. When you said that, I was
Yeah.
like, man, that Iron Viz needs a bing bang boom, and it's not getting it at all today.
I would get that on a t-shirt.
Bing bang boom data. But then I'll quote you, bing bang boom dash autumn.
All right, guys. I have the results. So here we are. I can't show it. You're just going to have to trust me on this. So in the first round, the team arguing for the use of Figma in the workplace got a vote of 29%. This time around, they have a vote of 43%, so an increase of 14%. The first time around, the team voting against using Figma at work had a vote of 16%. This time around, they have a vote of 39%, a gain of 23%, meaning the winner is the team voting against the argument for using Figma at work.
We did it, Jen. We
High
did
five, man. You and me.
Interesting.
We're
Well,
going to go places. Sorry.
that's how a debate works, right? You didn't have the highest percent, but you gained the most votes between the two polls. So great work, everybody. Congratulations, team.